Welcome to Cino Magna, where the world's greatest films come alive, through stories, hidden truths, and the cinema history most people never get to experience. If you live for powerful, unforgettable movies, subscribe to Cino Magna right now and turn on notifications so you never miss a single upload. Today, we are shining a light on 12 of the most visually breathtaking films ever made that almost nobody is talking about. Let's begin. What makes a film truly unforgettable? Is it the budget? The star power? The marketing machine behind it? Sometimes. But the most breathtaking films ever made, the ones that genuinely stop your breath, the ones that stay with you for days after you watch them, are almost never the ones playing on every screen in every mall in every city. They are the quiet ones, the strange ones, the ones that trusted their audience enough to be genuinely, fearlessly different. And today, Cino Magna is taking you on a journey through 12 of the most visually stunning, emotionally devastating, and criminally overlooked films ever committed to celluloid. You may have heard of one or two of these, but we promise, by the end of this video, your watch list will never look the same again. Music shifts, warm, curious, cinematic. These films come from different countries, different decades, different genres, but they all share one thing. Somebody poured their entire soul into making them, and almost nobody noticed. Until now. We start with something warm, something that will make you smile before it makes you think. Be Kind, Rewind, directed by Michel Gondry, is one of the most joyful, creative, and quietly heartbreaking films of the 2000s. The story is simple on the surface. Jerry, played by Jack Black, accidentally erases every single tape in his friend's video rental store. And rather than face the consequences, the two friends decide to recreate every film from scratch, by themselves, with no budget, no equipment, and absolutely no professional experience. What follows is one of cinema's greatest love letters, not just to movies, but to community, to creativity, to the radical idea that stories belong to everyone, not just Hollywood. The homemade recreations of Ghostbusters, Rush Hour, and RoboCop, filmed on a handheld camera in a New Jersey street, are simultaneously the funniest and most genuinely moving sequences in any film from that decade. But here is what most people missed completely. Beneath the laughter and the chaos, Be Kind, Rewind is really a film about what happens when a community comes together around shared stories, and how those stories, however imperfect, are what hold us together. Michel Gondry doesn't make films. He makes feelings. And this one will stay with you long after the credits roll. If you love creativity, community, and pure cinematic joy, Be Kind, Rewind is essential viewing. From the warmth of New Jersey, we travel to somewhere far colder, far more dangerous, and breathtakingly, impossibly beautiful. Slow West is the Western that reinvented the Western, and almost nobody saw it happen. Directed by John McClane, this film follows a young Scottish boy named Jay, who travels across the American frontier in search of the woman he loves. Along the way, he is joined by a mysterious bounty hunter named Silas, played with effortless, magnetic cool by Michael Fassbender. What makes Slow West extraordinary is not its plot. It is its atmosphere. Every single frame of this film looks like a painting that somehow learned to move. The golden prairies, the brutal violence that arrives without warning, the silences that say more than any dialogue could. Director John McClane, in his very first feature film, created something that feels simultaneously like a classic Western and something cinema had genuinely never seen before. The ending of Slow West is one of the most visually arresting final sequences in modern film history. A burst of color and chaos and heartbreak that arrives so suddenly, it physically stops your breath. If you have never seen Slow West, stop everything you are doing this weekend and fix that immediately. From the American frontier, we descend into something far more primal, far more terrifying, and somehow even more beautiful. Manos is unlike anything you have ever seen. Directed by Alejandro Landis, this Colombian war film follows a group of child soldiers, given the code name Manos, guarding an American hostage on a remote mountain peak somewhere in Latin America. There is no clear villain in Manos. There is no clear hero. There is only the mountain, the jungle, the fog, and a group of children who were handed weapons before they were handed a childhood. Shot with a visual intensity that is almost overwhelming, Manos won the World Cinema Jury Prize at Sundance and was described by critics as one of the most visually ambitious films of the entire decade. The cinematography by Jasper Wolf transforms the landscape itself into a character, one that is breathtakingly beautiful and quietly, constantly threatening. Manos asks questions most films are afraid to ask, about war, about loyalty, about what human beings become when the structures that define civilizations simply disappear. Manos is not an easy film, but it is an essential one. From the mountains of Latin America, we travel to Spain, to a world where tragedy wears a painted smile, and where the line between comedy and horror has never been thinner. The Last Circus, directed by Alex de la Iglesia, is one of the most audacious, visually overwhelming films to emerge from European cinema in the last 20 years. Set against the backdrop of the Spanish Civil War and the Franco dictatorship, this film tells the story of two clowns, one happy, one sad, both in love with the same woman. What follows is, by any standard of measurement, completely unlike anything else in cinema. Part tragedy, part dark comedy, part operatic love story, part something that simply defies any category you try to place it in. The production design alone, the costumes, the colors, the sheer visual madness of the final act, would make this film worth watching even with the sound turned off completely. De la Iglesia uses the circus as a metaphor for the madness of political extremism, and the result is a film that is simultaneously hilarious, heartbreaking, and genuinely shocking. The Last Circus is the film that reminds you, cinema can still genuinely surprise you. From Spain, we travel to Hungary, for a film that will make you see the world completely differently, through the eyes of the last creatures you would ever expect. White God, directed by Cornel Mundruczó, opens with one of the most breathtaking shots in modern cinema. A young girl on a bicycle, riding through the empty streets of Budapest, followed by hundreds of dogs. That image alone tells you everything you need to know about what kind of film this is. White God tells the story of Hagen, a mixed-breed dog, abandoned by his owner and forced to survive on the brutal streets of Budapest. What begins as a heartbreaking story of survival, slowly, deliberately transforms into something far more powerful, a full-scale rebellion, shot using over 250 real trained dogs. With no CGI and no digital trickery, White God won the Uncertain Regard Prize at Cannes, and is one of the most visually inventive and emotionally devastating films of the last decade. Beneath the surface, this is a film about class, oppression, outcasts, and what happens when the marginalized finally refuse to be ignored. White God is extraordinary, and almost nobody outside of film festival circuits has ever seen it. From the streets of Budapest, we travel somewhere that exists between worlds, between reality and imagination, between life and story. The Fall, directed by Tarsem Singh, is quite simply one of the most visually beautiful films ever made. Set in a 1920s Los Angeles hospital, a bedridden stuntman tells an elaborate fantasy story to a young girl recovering from a broken arm. As the story unfolds, the film cuts between the hospital and the fantasy world, a world so impossibly, breathtakingly beautiful that it genuinely looks like a dream made visible. Pattern interrupt. Music softens to wonder. Filmed across 24 countries over 4 years. Every single location in The Fall is completely real. No green screen. No digital backgrounds. Just the actual world, captured at its most extraordinary. The Taj Mahal, the salt flats of Bolivia, the ancient temples of Prague, all woven together into a visual tapestry that has never been equaled in cinema, before or since. The Fall received almost no mainstream attention on release. It was too strange, too beautiful, too generous for the audiences that were offered it. But those who found it never forgot it. From the dreamscape of The Fall, we arrive at one of the most elegiac, mournful, and achingly beautiful westerns ever made. The assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford is the western that asks the question no western had ever dared ask before. What does it feel like to kill your hero? Directed by Andrew Dominik, with Brad Pitt as Jesse James and Casey Affleck as Robert Ford. This film unfolds with the slow, inevitable patience of a dream you know is about to become a nightmare. The cinematography by Roger Deakins, widely considered one of the greatest cinematographers in film history, is simply stunning. Every frame looks like a 19th century painting brought to life. The golden light, the vast empty prairies, the intimate interiors where legend and violence live side by side. At nearly 3 hours long, this film demands your patience and rewards it with something genuinely rare in modern cinema. A portrait of fame, obsession, and the terrible price of legend. Casey Affleck's performance as Robert Ford, the man who worshipped Jesse James and then destroyed him, is one of the greatest performances in American cinema. This film was overlooked on release. History has been correcting that mistake ever since. From the American West, we descend into something far stranger, far darker, and visually unlike anything else on this list. The Cell, directed by Tarsem Singh, was marketed as a thriller, but what it actually is one of the most visually daring pieces of cinematic art ever released by a major Hollywood studio. Jennifer Lopez plays a psychotherapist who uses experimental technology to enter the mind of a comatose serial killer in order to find his final victim before she dies. What she finds inside his mind is a landscape of such extraordinary, disturbing, and genuinely awe-inspiring visual imagination that The Cell remains, 25 years later, one of the most visually inventive films Hollywood has ever produced. Inspired by painters including Damien Hirst and H.R. Giger, production designer Tom Foden created environments that look like no other film before or since. Critics at the time focused on the darkness of the subject matter. What they missed was that Tarsem Singh had created a genuine work of visual art, hiding inside a Hollywood thriller. The Cell deserves far more than the conversation it has been given. From the psychological depths of The Cell, we travel to 17th century England for something that feels like a fever dream, shot in black and white, and utterly, defiantly unlike anything else in cinema. A Field in England, directed by Ben Wheatley, is one of the most genuinely experimental films ever made outside of art cinema. Set during the English Civil War, a group of deserters stumble across an alchemist searching for treasure buried in a field. What follows is genuinely difficult to describe in conventional terms. Pattern interrupt, music becomes stranger, shot in stark black and white, with sequences of such visual intensity that they have been described as genuinely hallucinatory. A Field in England divides audiences completely. Some find it impenetrable. Others, and we count ourselves among them, find it one of the most genuinely original pieces of British cinema ever made. The film was released simultaneously in cinemas, on television, and on streaming. A genuinely radical distribution experiment that deserved far more attention than it received. A Field in England is not for everyone. But for the right audience, it is absolutely unforgettable. From the English countryside, we travel to a film that asks the most fundamental question about identity, in the most visually extraordinary way imaginable. Upstream Color, directed by Shane Carruth, is the film that proves one extraordinary mind with almost no resources can create something that the entire Hollywood system could never produce. Made for just $50,000, Upstream Color tells the story of two people, drawn together by a shared trauma they cannot fully understand or remember. Pattern interrupt. Music becomes more complex. Hirth, who also composed the score, shot the film, and edited it, created something that operates less like a conventional narrative and more like a poem that happens to be expressed in images. It is a film about cycles, about connection, about the invisible threads that bind living things together, in ways that go far beyond what we can consciously perceive. Upstream Color is not a film you understand on first viewing. It is a film you experience, and then spend the next week quietly thinking about. At $50,000 and pure creative vision, Upstream Color is one of independent cinema's greatest achievements. From the fragile beauty of Upstream Color, we travel to Estonia for a film that feels like a fairy tale, told by someone who has seen too much of the world to believe in happy endings. November, directed by Rainer Sarnet, is one of the most visually extraordinary films to emerge from European cinema in the last decade. Shot in stunning black and white, this Estonian film is set in a 19th-century village, where the living and the dead exist side by side, and ancient creatures called krats, built from farm equipment and animal bones, serve their human masters in exchange for their souls. Pattern interrupt. Music swells hauntingly. Into this world of folklore and shadow comes a love story, pure, impossible, devastating. A young peasant girl in love with a village boy, who only has eyes for a visiting German baroness. November is the kind of film that reminds you that cinema is still capable of genuine magic, that a camera, a landscape, and a story that trusts its audience completely can create something that Hollywood's entire industrial machine simply cannot replicate. November won 17 international awards, and almost nobody outside Europe has seen it. From the delicate black and white world of November, we end our journey with the most ambitious, most overwhelming, most genuinely singular film on this entire list. Hard to Be a God, directed by Alexei German, is a film that exists in a category entirely of its own. Based on a 1964 Soviet science fiction novel, this Russian film follows a scientist from Earth, sent to observe a distant planet that is trapped in a permanent medieval dark age, where intellectuals and artists are systematically hunted and destroyed. Shot over 15 years. Completed only after the director's death. Hard to Be a God is 3 hours of the most relentlessly, overwhelmingly immersive cinema ever created. Shot in extreme close-up, with a handheld camera that moves through mud, crowds, rain, and darkness. The film creates the sensation of actually existing inside a medieval nightmare. It is exhausting. It is extraordinary. It is unlike anything else that has ever been called a film. Roger Ebert's website described it as one of the greatest films ever made by a director who refused to make anything easy. Hard to Be a God demands everything from its audience and gives back something that cannot be found anywhere else in cinema. 12 films. 12 entirely different worlds. 12 filmmakers who refused, absolutely refused, to make something ordinary. These films will not always be comfortable. They will not always be easy, but they will always be worth it. Because the best cinema doesn't just entertain you. It changes the way you see. And once you have truly seen, you can never go back. Which of these 12 films are you watching first? Tell us in the comments, and let us know which stunning overlooked film you think deserves to be on this list. That is our complete journey through 12 of the most stunning overlooked films ever made. If this video opened your eyes to something new, like, share, and subscribe to Cino Magna. Which movie should we cover next? Tell us in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.